quorum. Would you please stand for our invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Gracious Heavenly Father God, we call upon your name and give thanks to you for your good and your love for us endures forever. Almighty God, at this time I especially pray for City Council and for our community during this excessive heat wave. Provide shelter and shade for those especially in need. We pray for our widows and our orphans, all the needy, the homeless, the poor. God, we thank you for our community. We just pray for special wisdom upon our leaders. We pray for those that put their lives at risk for the sake of others, especially we think of our law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, first responders. God, take care of them. Lord, make us good resources, good stewards of your resources, and bless us as we seek to serve you. We pray this in the name of Jesus and by the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Be seated. Ceremonial matters, proclamations, and employee recognitions.
No recognitions this morning, Mayor.
Item 5, council comments.
I just wanted to acknowledge Andrea Schmidt and her team for all the work they've done in the pools recently and conducting the numerous interviews and staffing appropriately to help provide such an important service to our community during this heat wave. So thank you for you and your team and everything you all have done.
Last Thursday, I attended a meeting out at our 10 acres on Friendship Lane with the soccer associations and Garrett and Andrea discussing what we can do about soccer fields for the youth. We came to agreement that the city would provide water for the existing soccer fields on Friendship on 16. And if you'll drive by there now, you can see them trenching and laying pipe to provide water. And the soccer associations will take care of watering the fields, and if they need to add grass, they'll take care of that. But our goal is to get the soccer fields in shape to play the first week of September. So pretty excited about that. We had an airport board meeting yesterday. T-hangar occupancy is 100% as usual, with 29 on the wait list. The Texas Forest Service located 4 firefighting aircraft yesterday to Fredericksburg, and so they're anticipating hot weather and hopefully not too many fires, but they're prepared for it. Crosswind, who is the ground school at the airport, has 11 students. TAC Aero, which a couple of years ago had made the announcement they're moving to the West Coast. They did make that move, and they've moved back. And since then, they have 18 employees. They have a flight school that's full, and it's a pretty good operation out there now. If you drive by the airport, you'll see 3 hangars going up. 2 of them, 2 large hangars at the FBO. They almost have all the steel up for the outside and the roof. And we've got 1 private hangar going up. Construction has slowed a little bit, but they hope to have the hangars operational by the 4th quarter. Avgas is up. That's for the small planes, and jet fuel is down. But a lot of that is from last year was the Forest Service fighting fires. We haven't had that problem so far this year. So we hope the jet fuel increases, the usage increases, but we don't want fires to do that. So, and if you're a pilot, Oshkosh is this weekend, so a bunch of people will be heading up there. So that's my report.
Ms. Kirk or Mr. Klein, either one.
I want to echo Randy and Bobby's praise for Andrea. I know you've got a lot on your plate right now between pool and soccer fields, and also want to thank the whole Parks Department for the work y'all are doing with the water department on getting that irrigation laid for soccer. I was able to tag along with the police department and do a ride along, which was very insightful. And if you have the time, I really encourage people to sign up. Our men and women in uniform are doing a fantastic job in keeping us safe and encountering some interesting people and animals of all kinds. So thanks for the work that they do. I learned a lot at 3:30 in the morning. Also wanted to flag that the Alzheimer's Association will be hosting a resource fair and caregiver education seminar at Villages of Windcrest on July 27th from 9:30 to 11:30. And there's information on my social media, but just let me know if you have any questions about that. But they're just helping with training, and there'll be different clinics and information on memory care facilities and guardianship attorneys. So.
I'd like to take this opportunity to address a comment that I made at our last open session. It was during the discussion about appointing the committee for charter review, and the comment was made just before we finished the vote that there was a shortage of women on this appointment list. And in a feeble and failed attempt to be humorous, the person who raised that issue, I said out in public, well, this is Fredericksburg. And there was a person in the audience who mistook what I said as a completely misogynist, piggish statement, where it was just really a dumb attempt at trying to be humorous. The context of that, when you make a comment like that in public without context, you can expect to be called on it, and I was. But it turned out that the reason I said that was a private joke to a person on the dais many, many years ago, and I won't be specific. I was on a committee to select someone for a position, and when it came time to pick the top three, one of mine was a woman, and it was an important position in the community. Now, this is over a dozen years ago, many years ago, which Fredericksburg has changed, but the comment was made by other people on the committee. Fredericksburg's not ready for that because of the patriarchal culture, the historical culture, the way that things have gone in the city. This is a responsible position that has to do with mostly men in the community, and we probably aren't ready for a woman. And the comment that stuck with me was, well, this is Fredericksburg, we're not ready for that yet. So without that context, then it sounded like I was being a misogynist pig. I'm not. And anybody who's worked with me for any length of time knows that. So that's a lesson that I will not need to relearn, is to be careful about the way you throw away failed humor attempt in a public meeting that goes out on YouTube and is there forever and so forth. So I hope anybody that watched that meeting and are in perpetuity will watch this one as well to hear the explanation that I made on that. Any further comments, council? All right, let's go to number 6, consent agenda, which we have one item, which is consider the approval of the minutes from that meeting, July 5th.
I move we approve the minutes from the July 5th regular meeting.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the minutes. Any discussion? All in favor of the minutes of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're now item 7A. To consider a request by Rebecca Rather, Clayton Walford, Bradley Ayler, Danielle Saunders, Catherine Harrison, and Nancy Hall for the following Z2313. Number 1, a land use change from low density residential to medium density residential for properties located at 402, 06, 08, 12, 14, and 16 East Austin and 204 North Elm. And number 2 is a zoning change from R1 single family to R2 mixed residential for properties located at those same addresses. We will begin with the presentation by the applicant. Is that correct? Okay. As is presented. All right.
Good morning. My name is Anna Wynne Smith, and I represent the owner of 204 North Elk Street, along with the group of owners for the other properties on this petition, requesting this change in zoning from R1 to R2. This group has tried for commercial zoning in the past, and it was recommended that they rather seek R2 zoning. This process of rezoning application actually started back in 2017, and this is where we are finally today. East Austin Street and North Elk have become a go-to detour for traffic to avoid the Main Street Llano traffic intersection. One can drive north on Elk Street on any day during the week, and at some stages during the day, there will be a line of cars blocking the intersection in pursuit of reaching the traffic light on Main Street. I have provided just one example in some photographs which the City Council have. This area is as busy as any commercially active area of downtown Fredericksburg. 9 of the 7 Planning and Zoning Committee approved this change, and of the comments that were raised by the 2 who did not support it, I would like to address those specifically. The first comment was Town Creek already provides the 400 block of East Austin with a natural buffer zone, so an R2 buffer zone is not needed. In response to that, this is not taking into account that the creek crosses under Austin Street at the intersection between the 300 and 400 blocks. The creek does provide a buffer for the 300 block and on down the line, but because it crosses under at the 400 block, all vehicular and pedestrian traffic is forced onto this side of the street. In fact, this block has the only sidewalk that feeds the 2 museums. The second comment was that if these properties are changed to R2, it opens up the prospect for the houses on Schubert Street to say, we need to be R2 too, because we are now adjacent to R2. Firstly, a request is a request, and it does not have to be approved. And as stated in this objection, the Planning and Zoning Commission did turn down a request in 2022, 2 blocks north, for a change from R1 to R2. So it can be done again. The Schubert Street block also does not have any commercial activity, heavy pedestrian activity, tour bus parking, or any of those directly across from their street, as do Elk and Austin. The other comment was that there are lots of busy areas due to traffic, as, quote, traffic is like water and it finds the easiest ways to go. Well, traffic, as mentioned, including vehicles, tour buses, pedestrians, found Elk Street and the 400 block of Austin. Not only this type of traffic, but the noise from Main Street, the karaoke bar, the Hive, to name just a few that are all migrating down to those blocks, can be clearly heard late at night and especially on weekends, no matter which way the wind is blowing or the water is flowing. 204 North Elk Street is currently listed for sale, and all the buyers' objections were to be as expected. No one who looks at it wants to reside there because of the incredibly busy street and the current surrounding use of properties. I haven't even mentioned yet the noise from the reenactments that occur directly across the street at the Nimitz. Have any of you hovered around this area on weekends when the enactments are actually underway, or during the week when there are practices on, or generally on any weekend or weekday? I have several times and on different days at different times, and it is staggering how many pedestrians, tour buses, and vehicles jam this area, let alone the noise. The 204 Elk Street property was built by its current owners 25 years ago. It is unsellable as an R1 family residential property due to the use of the other properties surrounding it and the commercial activity across the street. There is definitely no scope for children to ride their bicycles or play on this street, let alone cross the street safely. The practical reality, with no emotion or agendas involved, is that this R1 zoned area that has transitioned over the past 25 years is no longer a neighborhood. It does not resemble anything close to a neighborhood, and it could or should actually be commercially zoned. Thank you so much to the Planning and Zoning for your approval and to the City Council for your consideration.
Staff report.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Yes, so this morning we're discussing two things really, a land use change and a zoning change. And Anna, I think you did a great job summarizing it. You hit all the points that I wanted to hit on the use, the current uses, and the reality of what this intersection is, this entire block face. So I think you can see my screen. So as you can see, we're talking about the 400 block of East Austin on the north side. The south side is a CBD zoning, a central business district with the creek running through it. So it's between CBD to the west, and the reenactment zone is to the east. They're the blue that you see on the screen. So that's a public facility use zoning, but obviously we know that's the reenactment zone. So to the north, we've got East Schubert, which is zoned R1, and is, I think Anna pointed out very astutely, there's no commercial on either side of the 400 block of East Schubert. So it is a different feel to that area, and it does not see the cut through traffic that you see, because East Schubert does dead end there at Washington. So less traffic coming through than the east block of Austin. As she summarized, this went to planning and zoning. There were a couple comments from P&Z about a lot of it came around the short-term rentals, and I didn't really speak to the short-term rental issue. I think that's kind of been the issue that's brought some of the neighborhood concern to the forefront, and I think that's the bigger picture we've been dealing with multiple different meetings. We're also in the middle of the comp plan, but the comp plan won't zone these micro zoning issues, where we have very specific blocks that we need to address. To me, this shows us that our kind of old method of doing zoning, commercial here, residential here, is not quite serving us well anymore. So that's a bigger conversation we're having through the comprehensive plan and land use conversations that we will take up in our next meeting for the comp plan. So on this particular block, the reality of it remaining R1, that's not staff's recommendation to leave it at R1. The applicants came several months ago and talked to staff in the Development Review Committee meeting, and we kind of talked through all the options if that was going to be commercial. Ms. Rather has been a successful restaurateur and, had wanted maybe to do a coffee shop, which I think would make sense, right? If we could allow a small coffee shop that would not intrude on the residential behind it, but serve the people that are walking from Tubby's to the reenactment zone. But our current zoning just doesn't allow for that real mix of uses we couldn't allow one spot zoning in the middle of it. So the initial request was for commercial, and P&Z kind of blocked that down and said, come back with R2. So they changed the request to R2, and so that's what we're presenting today, which will act more as a transition buffer zone between the CBD and C2, and then to the residential to the north. So that would allow by right one STR unoccupied. There are currently 2 STRs in the R1 on this block. And there are already some other STRs in the immediate vicinity. I sent you an updated email yesterday with that image. It's 415 East Schubert is actually an STR. So within the 200 feet, there are 6 permitted STRs already. So R2 zoning would allow by right 1 unoccupied on each parcel. It would not allow a facility. They would have to be abutting commercial to allow that. It would not really impact the availability of new unoccupied on East Schubert, because the requirements in the R1, assuming then that the East Schubert 400 block remains R1, that they would have to have 2 adjoining property lines and 75% of their block face as existing operating STRs to be able to apply for a conditional use permit. So we don't see changing the 400 block of East Austin as then allowing more STRs on East Schubert, because it would stay R1 and it would still have that very high threshold of being able to be eligible to apply for the CUP. So all that to say, staff is recommending approval of the R2. I'm happy to answer any questions.
And just to clarify what you said, so the 75% in 2 abutting, that's on the block face towards Schubert, or does that include the entire block? So if that entire section does go STR at some point in time, does that whole block fall to 75%?
Are we talking about East Schubert?
Yes.
Okay.
Is it just facing that street, or is it whole block?
It says the block face in the ordinance.
Anna, I don't see the protests in our packet. Can you tell me who?
Yes, that one came out later. And we only received 1. The initial request for commercial did prompt a lot of opposition, but this last request for R2, we only heard 1 letter in opposition.
What was the substance of the protest? Did you mention?
Yes, concern for the alleyway, which is a partial alleyway. It does not go all the way through. And I think maybe more concern for more STRs. Here we go. The Messer protest.
Sorry, what?
It's pulling up now. Mr. Messer sent it in. STR issue, concerns for more STRs, and then concern for blocking the alleyway. But it is a partial alleyway. It does not go all the way through the block.
So is there an opportunity that it would be blocked?
Not because of a zoning change. Nothing about the zoning change would change that situation.
Can y'all read that? Oh, there it is.
Some of the properties do not have proper parking and access to allow an additional STR or the other use allowed under R2, which R2 would allow for multifamily, a denser multifamily, but not STR facility.
All right. We have a public hearing scheduled for this.
I move we go out of regular session to public hearing.
Second.
Motion second to go from regular public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Mike Mahoney, you've signed up to speak on this.
My name is Mike Mahoney, and I am a citizen of Fredericksburg, live in town. Contrary to a lot of what's been said, this is not a zoning decision. This is, at its root, an STR decision about where STRs will be located. The petitioners made that very clear. The only reason they're seeking zoning here is so they can become an R2 zone and by right acquire the right to get STR permits on the entire block of Austin Street. That will be all enriching for them. Their values will go up. They can sell their property or operate it at a profit, but it's going to come at the expense of that entire block on the backside of their fence on Schubert Street. Only 2 houses on that back fence line of theirs are currently STRs. The others are not STRs. They're residents, they're second homes, but they are not being used for that. So they are in the home residential inventory of this town. The current city ordinance on STRs is very clear. None of this applies for the stranded property exception to become an STR. They are in R1. They're not entitled to be STRs. For whatever reason, they didn't jump in the Wild West line and get an STR permit back in 2022 when hundreds of others did. And now they've changed their mind and now they want an STR permit. But that's just not what the ordinance provides. There's no need to rush this zoning issue through. The comp plan is underway. It will look at overall across the city where these zoning changes need to be made, if any. There's nothing in recent years that's changed on Austin Street. This has been going on for years. Reenactment zone's been there for about 10 years now. So the reason they're here today is to rush this through and get an R2 zoning and get their STR permit before the current changes that the City Council and P&Z and the STR Task Force recommended changing in R2 and limiting for new permits in R2. They want to beat the gun on that. These homes are still available for residences. They can be used. This really boils down to a fairness argument. The Austin Street owners didn't apply for permits and now they want them. If this zoning change is denied, nothing changes for those properties. You're not taking anything away from those owners. They can continue to use those properties the way they have in the past. Their values are where they are. But if the city and the city defends the interest of the STR ordinance that it passed just a little over a year ago and says, no, there's no more new permits in R1. If the city approves this zoning ordinance, this zoning change, it enriches these owners. No doubt, they are entitled to get an STR permit, which many have said that's their goal. And it removes, but it comes at a cost. One, it removes homes from the residential home inventory that the citizens in this town in elections and comments know that we don't need any fewer homes for residences than we already have. So it removes all of those on Austin Street. All of Austin Street can potentially become that block a pure STR complex. Yeah, they may be individually owned, but one after the other, they're all going to be STRs. And it comes at a cost of those Schubert owners on the backside who haven't done anything change except now, if the city grants this R2 rezoning, they now all have STRs at their back fence, up to 25 feet away from their back fence. There's a vacant lot there. The person on that with that lot can build a 3-story building 25 feet from their back fence and operate as an STR. So it takes value from those neighbors. As soon as this is passed, their values go down. So you're giving to one and taking from another. the overall best interest of this town would be harmed by that. I think that's what zoning looks at, is not what's good for A or B, but what's the best interest for this town. And the best interest for this town is to retain as many residents as we have, keep R1 where it is, and I ask for you to vote against this rezoning. Thank you.
Jeffrey Kolb.
Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Kolb. My wife and I recently had purchased a home in a gated community. We're not downtown, but we are seeing dramatic changes going on with these STRs and alike. But my biggest concern is actually just indiscriminately taking an R1 and just making an R2 to facilitate property owners in that one little section. Once that occurs, then the people that are actually residents behind will certainly be affected. So my basic premise is saying, if you just arbitrarily just keep converting small neighbors' hoods into these mixed use, then the whole town will just start, buckling under these changes. And that's basically what I just have to say for the zoning. Thank you.
We're out of here. Is there someone else? Rebecca.
I have lived in my house since '05. I have lived in this town since 2000. First of all, I want to address the fact that none of us are planning on doing more short-term rentals. Clayton has one, and he has a small building behind him that he hasn't been able to use. He could use that, which is very, very small. Danielle is going to live in her house on the corner. Bradley's not doing anything else. Clayton already has a short-term rental. I'm not doing anything with my house. The last thing I want is a short-term rental in my house. Right now, I'm living in it. Kathy Harrison's lot will never be used. It's a life estate. Her house will never be turned into a short-term rental. It's a life estate. She never would allow a short-term rental in her home or on that lot. That lot will never be used. No 3-story short-term rentals going on that. I have a huge yard with a big garden and a chicken yard in back. I have really enjoyed my house most of this time, but the last 10 years have been hard. And I have put up with a lot. I've put up with screaming, yelling bachelorettes, throwing up in my yard, passing out in my yard. I've put up with all of it and the noise, but it's worse now. It's much worse. He's wrong. The bars on Main Street are out of control. The drunks have moved down to the 400 block. And when Brooks Bubble Bar opens, it will be twice as bad. All the women screaming out there, I hear that noise from the karaoke bar. I hear the singing. I hear the hive and the music blaring every weekend. I have to leave my home every weekend. There's no way it's residential, and there's no way anyone could really live in my house. I have machines going at night so I don't hear the noise. I have to wear earplugs. It's really, really bad. And I've tried to change my zoning since 2012. And I've talked to the city about it since then so I could put my bakery there and not have it ripped out from under me constantly every time I try to do something in this town. So, I am not going to put a bakery there. I live there, but it's hard and no one's going to want to really live on that block. The traffic, I can't pull out of my driveway ever because of all the foot traffic and the traffic blocking my driveway all the time. During a reenactment, people block my driveway constantly. It's the traffic on weekends is unbelievable. You can go drive down, look, come on a Saturday night, listen to the music, listen to the people screaming and yelling on Main Street that I hear. So, I don't think it's residential. I lost my neighborhood a long time ago. I had neighbors way back 10 years ago. I don't have neighbors now. Kathy doesn't live there. Danielle will live there down the street, and she's in Houston half the time. And he's also wrong about the short-term rentals behind us. The only person I know that lives on that street full time is the woman behind Clayton, and she's there. But I don't think there's another full-time resident on Schubert behind me. And their B&Bs, I hear their parties too. So, I have put up with a lot, and I have not asked for much here, but I really am asking that this be rezoned R2. Thank you.
Hold on, Rebecca. Can I ask her a question in a public hearing? Rebecca, the conditions that you described, anybody would agree that's terrible. And this is a concentrated area of vehicular and foot traffic. How would rezoning remedy your problem?
Well, I just think it's getting closer to at some point it needs to be commercial. It should have gone commercial.
But that's
It
not
should
what's
have.
that's not what's
That's
before us.
not.
Right.
But at least I could. I don't know. At some point, sell it because I can't live there.
Thank you.
And it's not a greed thing. It's just a noise thing. And we are not greedy on that block. We're not trying to get R2 because of greed. I'll show you greed in this town. I could name the people I think are greedy, but that's not us. And we have put up with a lot.
I prefer you didn't. Yeah.
No, I'm not. Thank you.
Maybe not publicly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else on speaking on this? All right. We need to go back in.
I move we go from public hearing to regular session.
Second.
Motion second to go back into regular session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anna, what was the compelling argument for not, do you recall, for not agreeing to make it commercial?
Well, with a commercial rezone, it would have been all the allowed uses, right? So it could have been a coffee shop that would have been great, but it was all the other potential uses that then would have been backing up to the R1. And also a lot of it came down to the height. So R2 allows 28 feet by right, and the commercial zoning allows higher. And so I think there was a lot of concern about potential if this was all demolished, because this particular block is not in the historic district, so there's no protection from demolition and there's no design review. So I think everybody just goes worst case scenario. If it were demolished and built new, what would those masses then look like? How tall could they be? And then what uses?
Is it ever done? This is an education question for me, that you approve a section for commercial, but you restrict the uses of commercial. In other words, you say in this block here, it is commercial for these uses, but we want to continue to restrict the height, and it's available for these uses like a bakery or something. Is that ever done?
Well, the way our zoning works, you get the whole menu. So we
there's
have
no
our
such thing as picking and choosing on a buffet. Okay.
correct. So our menus, we have C1 neighborhood commercial, which is the most restrictive, and then in C1, then there are several uses that are allowed by conditional use permit. But you have to allow everything that's on the menu and the heights with our current zoning. So again, another reason for future thinking about the way that we do zoning. But in this particular case, I think also knowing the affordable housing issue that we're having and the lack of density. And so R2, of course, would allow more dense housing, maybe up to a fourplex, depending on how large a lot would be, but allowing more density in living, not necessarily, again, STRs would just be limited to one per parcel.
Okay. All right, Council, we're at item 4 on this, which is to take action on, we have a land ordinance and a zoning ordinance change here. The discussion?
Yeah, I'll just mention that I have a great deal of trust and faith in planning and zoning and city staff on this. But when I reached out to a number of people across the spectrum of STR owners, neighborhood coalition, we've all received lots of letters on this. It's a challenging subject. In an ideal world, I believe it should be C1, R2, R1. And without question, I spoke to one of the P&Z members last night, a very, very experienced individual who does work in the hospitality space, and he showed me some mapping, and he showed that close to 3,000 cars go down Elk Street, and I'm guilty on one of them. So there's no question in my mind that the urban sprawl, for lack of a better term, that's taken place has engulfed this area. What I'm struggling with is April 2022 code set forth certain criteria to abutting 75% density. And my concern is, are we setting a precedent by changing one specific area from one zone to another zone without taking in the broader idea of the comprehensive plan and what that should look like? And I understand, Anna, what you said, that comp plan may not specifically address this micro area, but I believe there should be a larger picture. Should this be R2 at some point in time? That's a question I think that the comp plan should help answer. That's my perspective.
I'll state that I generally want to support the recommendations of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I have been attending those meetings just because I can these days and watch them in action and hear the petitions and hear their questions and the way they make decisions. And we're being very well served by our Planning and Zoning Commission Council. I know you know that. Community, I want you to know that I believe very strongly in the ability to look out after the full community of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I have to have good reasons to go against the recommendation. I will say that, yeah, that this particular item was voted approval 7-2. To me, the two that voted against it carry a lot of weight because they're colleagues from previous councils. One is a former mayor, been here a long, long time, have dealt with a lot of these issues of community change and so forth. So hearing their comments and seeing their voting against it carried some weight with me. Although I understand that it was a 7-2 vote. And I don't like to go against P&Z, but I'm going to on this occasion because I believe that there are prevailing competing interests here. The traffic is a problem, and it would be a problem if I lived there, I know. But this is not a remedy to a traffic issue. And it may be that as we take another look at zoning pieces through the comp plan, there may be some sections here and there that make more sense to become a different zone. In my view, today this one does not.
I want to thank everyone who has emailed, called. Thanks P&Z for your deliberations on this. It's funny, when I was first on planning and zoning, there was a project for an STR permit in R1, and nothing in the current ordinance at that time had anything to do with density of other STRs in the neighborhood. And so the reasoning was, well, there's already a lot, so we're going to allow this STR permit. And it seems like we're waiting on the comprehensive plan for a lot. There's a lot I'd love to get started on: trails, overlays, future use, water-wise restrictions. And so I was a little concerned to hear that this would not be addressed in the comprehensive plan, because I think this is key to the future thriving of our city, is being able to determine what zoning is where. So I don't want to keep looking at these piecemeal zoning requests in the great R1 versus R2 battle. So until density of STRs is addressed, I'm not going to be approving things like this. So I'm a no on this.
Let me just clarify one point, Emily, since you brought it up. My decision is not based on, I'm not suggesting you're suggesting that I said this, but I want to make clear that I'm not just punting the ball until we get a comp plan done. I'm opposed to more STRs. I think we're greatly imbalanced in the community. And if this becomes available for STRs, I think history has shown us that the chances are highly likely they will become. And I did walk the Schubert block yesterday, and knocked on doors to talk to residents there. And I got a lady who lives on Schubert Street, and she's lived there since 1978. And she's grew up in this town and so forth. So she would be impacted by this here strictly because of STRs. And her complaint was, I have no neighbors. I have no neighbors. And I hear that a lot all over town. So I'm not going to be part at this time of contributing to that. Anyone else, Bobby? Tony?
I just want to say that I do think we need to look at our zoning and look at the entire deal, kind of like you two guys just brought up. I realize that you're a block from Main Street. Main Street's changed, and the traffic certainly, until we get some different route from the east side going over to Lano, that I use that thing too. Everybody does, and it does back up, and just like this picture shows. But I don't think we're ready to do that right now. We need to look at it, consider it, but I'm thinking the entire sections of the zoning needs to be looked at again.
If you look back on my record, I've supported P&Z's recommendations almost 100%, but on this one, I'll have to go against that record. I don't think there's a lot of reasons that R2 could make sense. But at this point, my concern is the growth of STRs, the loss of neighborhoods that I've stated before. If you look at the overall map of this area, there's 3 blocks that are still R2. They've got R1. They've got R2 on both ends of that area, bordered by East Travis Street. Randy made a comment, there are 3,000 cars on Elk Street a day. There was a traffic study done about 8 years ago, and the number was higher than that. And the cars that get to Elk Street, they come down East Travis. So if you start letting R2 creep and STRs creep, we're going to lose a good portion of this residential area. And I just think it's a bad decision. Making this area R2 does nothing for the noise, does nothing for the traffic. It is what it is. And it's unfortunate that you have, well, it's unfortunate and it's fortunate, but unfortunate that you have the Nimitz on one side or 2 sides, and then you've got commercial across the street. But the only reason that I see the reason for R2 right now is for the neighbors to turn their houses into STRs. And I know that they've said they're not. I have my questions on that. So I'll be voting against the zoning.
Mayor, if I may, one more thing. I just think that we've all kind of said this, but we need to be helpful to our residents and businesses and investors in having a well thought out plan for the entire city instead of piecemealing things like this.
The other thing I'm concerned about is if we approve this, are we setting a precedent that a group of neighbors can get together and change the zoning on any block in the city? And I just think that's a bad precedent to start, if it is a precedent.
Great question.
One last comment, just a respectful correction to Mr. Mahoney. Mike and I did spend several months on STR task force, and you made mention that the task force recommended limiting or doing something with R2, and I don't believe that was a unanimous decision, so I just wanted to point that out for the record.
Okay, I'd like a vote of record on this, please.
I make a motion that we deny the request for 7A.
All right, we'll take it in two bits, right? Yes. Okay, one is the ordinance 2308, adopting a change in the comp plan, specifically in the land use of this area we've been discussing. So, did I get a second?
Second.
A motion second to deny. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right. Item 5 is ordinance 2023-09, amending the zoning ordinance from R1 to R2 on this property.
Make a motion to deny the
Second.
request.
Have a motion second to deny. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Both motions carry unanimously. Thank you. Other actions, items, and updates. 8A. Take action on a request to waive a security deposit, reservation fees, and policy for the Veterans Council of Gillespie County to bring the moving wall, a third scale replica of the Vietnam Veterans Wall in D.C., to the Pioneer Pavilion in either April or May 2025. Ms. Schmidt?
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Andrea Schmidt, Parks and Recreation Department. This morning, I'm bringing a fee waiver request from the Veterans Group of Gillespie County. They're asking to bring, as the mayor mentioned, a replica of the Veterans Wall from Washington, D.C. here to the Pioneer Pavilion. It would be for 6 days use in either April or May of 2025. The total fee for that would be $1,375. $875 is the actual fee, and $500 is for the deposit. So staff does support this fee waiver, and then we would allow them to rent more than a year in advance, which we typically don't do on the Pioneer Pavilion rentals. Ms. Tammy King is here from the Veterans Council of Gillespie County in case you had any specific questions. But other than that, we'd ask you to consider this fee waiver.
Hello, Tammy.
Good morning. I wear several hats in the community as the Gillespie County Veteran Service Officer. I'm a county employee. I'm also the chairman of the Veterans Council of Gillespie County, and I'm the senior vice commander of the VFW. I have here with me also Jim Bisson, who is the VFW commander, and he is also a on-ground Vietnam veteran. So if he has any question, or you have any questions of him. We are proposing this because it is the 50th anniversary of the ending of the Vietnam War. The moving wall comes around to various communities in the United States and is here for a 6-day period. This is a solemn event. It's not a party, which I've already had a few people inquire, well, we can have bands and we'll have a big old celebration. This is a solemn event for not only the veterans who live here in Gillespie County. We have approximately 3,000 veterans. We have over 600 Vietnam era veterans in Gillespie County, and many of them have died here in Gillespie County, and we have about 195 who are buried here in Gillespie County. So we have already partnered with the Rotary Club, the Nimitz chapter, the Evening Rotary, who has obligated to pay the $7,000 that it costs to bring the moving wall here. We will be partnering with many nonprofits and other organizations in the community because this is not only an event for us here in Gillespie County, but also the surrounding counties, for all the Vietnam veterans and their families and those who have lost someone to come and honor those whose names are on the wall and those that we have lost and who have died. We're proposing that it would be at Lady Bird Park because, and at the Pioneer Pavilion, because it will have an indoor facility that we can hold our ceremony, has restroom facilities, has an area that we will have many volunteers escorting families and veterans to the wall to find the names of those service members that they served with. And they will be able to do etchings of their names because it's made of metal and has raised names on it. But there are restrictions per the contract with the moving wall. So no music, no fundraising, no vendors. This is not a place where we're going to be staging fundraising activities. And one of my roles whenever I do a large event like this, the last large event we did was in 2018, which was the World War I centennial with the parade and the other events. There will be no politics. So that's one of my major roles. So We have also already coordinated with the airport manager, Tony Lombardi, and also with Gwen Fulbrook, the owner of Crosswinds, and they will be coordinating at the same time an airport display and aircraft of warbirds that will be coming for that weekend, also probably on the Saturday. So we'll be hopefully you will approve the waiver of that $1,375 for the event. I would really like the city to be a partner in this entire event, so that you know, the city of Fredericksburg does lots of wonderful things, and I just think this would be another great event for you to partner with us on. Jim?
Yeah, Tammy, real quick. I think this is incredible. First of all, having participated, honor flight's a separate opportunity. I understand that, but I think of in terms of it'll be here for how many days total?
It'll be here for a total of 6 days.
6
Some of
days.
those are set up and tear down days, so it'll be on display for 3 days, Friday through Sunday.
So I don't want to be the event coordinator, but I can envision veterans coming from San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, almost like a small honor flight to come to this wall. I think
Yes, and we will be advertising it quite a bit throughout especially the Hill Country, with all the veterans organizations to get out the word so that they can come. This has to be a healing time period for our Vietnam veterans on this 50th anniversary. And
it's amazing.
Jim, I didn't know if Jim wanted to say.
Real quick, like I am a Vietnam veteran, and unfortunately, the way the units were not sent to Vietnam, but individual replacements went to Vietnam and came back as individual replacements. They never got the recognition or honor that they deserve. So this is a great opportunity for a lot of those Vietnam veterans here in Gillespie County and surrounding counties. And as you said, Randy, far away as Houston or Dallas, they'll come to this event and it's a closure thing for them. So I truly encourage the council to support this. And I have one other comment. If you remember back a few years ago, I forget what parade it was, but the Vietnam veterans were the grand marshals. There were 3 trailer loads of Vietnam veterans. They came as far away as Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, maybe further. But as we came out of the marshaling area, there were grown men crying. They had never had any recognition of their service.
Thank you, sir. Any further questions for Tammy?
Thank you, Tammy. Please keep us updated on how we can assist you.
Oh, I will. Thank you. Any other questions? No. Okay.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Tammy and Jim, for all that you do in this community to honor veterans. All right.
Mayor, I move that we approve waiving security deposit, reservation fees, and policy for the Veterans Council of Gillespie County to bring the moving wall here in 2025.
Second.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and second. Did you have something further? All right, motion and second on this to approve the waiving of the security deposit, reservation fees, and policy for this event. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries
Thank you.
unanimously. Thank you. And thanks. Okay, council, continued discussion regarding the need for affordable housing. I would benefit greatly from hearing your perspectives on this item on the agenda going forward, how you would like to see it pursued, changed. Would you like to consider some specific actions? Tell me what you're thinking about this item on the agenda in a routine way. Anybody? Comments about that?
Well, I've got issues of appointing a housing authority without a definite goal in mind. I think, or at least the feeling I have, is that we're not necessarily, I think we need to look at affordable housing and having some ownership in the people that are involved with that. I don't think that apartment project's going to be our answer right
So am I correct? You're speaking specifically of what was discussed about a housing authority, chapter 392.
I propose we continue the discussion on affordable housing. That's different than housing authority. I'm proud of our community and council for the work we've done in talking through and vetting it. And I don't think it's the right thing for Fredericksburg right now, but that doesn't mean we should take affordable housing off the agenda. I think looking back over the last 2 months, we've gotten into the details of that housing authority, but I think we can find something both in public and private sectors. There are things that are within the city's realm of control, the county, the school, private enterprise, philanthropy. I think there are ways we can go about it. We need to continue talking about it. So what I would like to see is some of the things I saw in the housing report that we could look into our form-based code and maybe some expedited permitting or fee waivers specifically. I don't have a lot of material on that now. I don't know a lot about it, so I need to get caught up. So I'm not saying in 2 weeks I can present on it, but I would like to bring in someone or have Anna with your planning background be able to talk to us more about what's possible.
Am I correct? You'd like to see a more directed approach to this item?
Yes.
Okay.
And what we can do as a city, and love to have those conversations continue for the workforce task force or whoever is appropriate. But let's be involved. Are there ways, the school can partner with someone and then we can help them with a fee waiver or something like that. So just keeping it going.
Any other comments?
Yes, I would definitely echo Emily Kirchner's comments. We have the problem. We acknowledge the problem. There is a problem. The question is, what's the correct tool to use to help resolve or minimize the problem? So I'd like to continue as well and continue to investigate other options and opportunities that were put forward in the housing document. In parallel, what the thing that keeps me awake at night is our police officers, fire and EMS. And in conversations with our two chiefs recently, I learned that our police officers, half of our entire staff are out of the county, not just Gillespie, but out of the county. And so they drive in on their shifts, they turn around, they drive back, and there's a lot of wear and tear and so forth that takes place as a result of that. With fire and EMS, these folks are working, I believe it's 48, Chief Bizzle, if you're in the room, 48 on, and they're 96 off. So they're driving quite a distance as well, but it's not quite as impactful. And in going through some of the budget recently with Krista I know that we've realized cost savings in fiscal year 2023, and it's for, unfortunately, a bad reason. It's because we're not staffed. So we do have a cost savings, and what I'd like to do is over the next couple of weeks, we can put a time frame to it, 30, 45 days, whatever it is, because that surplus in the FY23 budget does expire at the beginning of FY24. So there's a sense of urgency, but I think if we take a look at how could we creatively use those dollars to help encourage retention, provide some transitional housing options to have those officers move into the county or closer to the city. I'd like to ask for time to review that in depth, come back to the council with perhaps 1, 2, or 3 options and see if we can have an agreement on that.
I would agree with the comments made by everyone up here so far. I'm really proud of everything that's been done for during the last year. People that have supported this initiative, the fact that we've had it on the agenda, that we're talking about it, that we acknowledge that it is an issue and that something needs to be done. I don't want us to take it off the agenda and then forget about it. I think we need to continue to discuss it, and I don't know that it needs to continue to be on the agenda, but everyone involved, I think we need to make sure that we don't forget about it and continue our discussion and see if we can find good, positive ways to address this problem.
I do have one technical question for staff because it's been following on this agenda item. There's the City Council Rule of Procedures that's always attached to this agenda item. Is there a reason for that? Is there something we're supposed to be looking at every time it's on for housing, affordable housing? Is that just not relevant? Okay.
Cool.
The reason that it's good to keep it on the agenda, in my opinion, obviously, the downside is, well, all you do is talk. All you do is talk about it. But the upside is that we cannot discuss anything that's not on the agenda. And I'm very pleased with, and thank you, council, because I know this is one of the best groups of people I've worked with in any arena of doing your own work to pursue things on your own to find out the answers to the questions you have specifically regarding this. And the feedback that you give me about the things that you've discovered is very helpful to me. My hope as we proceed with this issue is that here's what I feel like I'm missing, and you can help me if it's in front of me and I'm missing it. But as somebody brought up in one of our earlier discussions when I ran for mayor in 2006, the issue was affordable housing. So it's been something on my plate for a long time. But I think I know where I'm coming to now is that it's helpful if we start to focus on specifically the problem. In other words, the specific cohort that we're looking to serve. We talked about people who have an opportunity for a path of ownership in housing that do not at present because of lots of conditions. We all know what they are. And what is that? I mean, it could be related to AMI, area median income. It could be related to employers saying, these are the people we hire, this is what we pay. But everybody has a piece of this solution. There's no solution for us. People look to the city council and say, fix our housing issue. Well, we can't. We have certain tools in our box, and Ms. Kirchner mentioned them, which is some of them, which is zoning issues, fees, infrastructure contributions, perhaps land contributions, and so forth. But we only have a limited number of tools in our box. It also is going to require developers to have some play in it, philanthropists having some play in it, it seems to me, and employers. Are they providing the work conditions for the people they require for their business? And there's part of that we can help, but there's a lot of it we can't. It would help me if through these discussions we start honing in on this is what we're looking to do. And these are the tools that we have that we are willing to expend or not. That's the discussion for the council to have, and I think we've moved the ball down the field well on this affordable housing issue as we do budget and everything else. So I'm open to your suggestions and help between meetings, anybody else in the public helping me know where to go. I have received one really thorough report from an employer in this town who owns several businesses and has given me a report about what they face in housing, the pay scale, what they require their people, and so forth. I wish that I had 10 of those from people who employ people, a significant number of people in this town. This person gave me their wage scales, their problems with trying to find housing, the number of people that, yes, if I had the opportunity, I would live here, and there are many that wouldn't, given the opportunity. So those kinds of, in spite of the fact I'm not a detail person, and Mr. Briley is, and I'm grateful for that, I would benefit from more details that would say, this is what we're trying to carve out as our solution. Let's go hard after that. I felt like that your presentation, Randy, on the SWOT on the Housing Authority was very helpful to me. And I think it was helpful to others as well. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. We do our homework. Here's what we found out. Well, maybe that's not the right way. Let's move on to the next step and so forth. Okay, that's my sermon. Anybody else? Wesley Hesker, you're signed up to speak on this.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments and discussions. Very enlightening to hear where your position is on this. And I would agree with a comment that was made by two individuals, one of them being you, Mr. Mayor, that the public sector has failed on this. And I would agree. Everybody has failed. Poverty has always existed, and it always will. But there have been many different attempts through history that have had more measured success than others. And when I look to the early years of this country. And you can find this information on heritage.org, by the way. They have some very good literature on the very concepts that communities went through to address um, getting people out of poverty. And one of the things that they noticed that was one of the most prevalent things with poverty was the sense of idleness. That if the state, which Benjamin Franklin observed this when he went to England, he said of all the countries he traveled to, England was one of the worst from the respect of giving people too much so that they just sat idle, as opposed to contributing to the community, finding work in the private sector that they could do. Obviously, pay scales have to match up so that it is affordable within the market. And there's things that take a large amount of time to balance out in order for that to work. And I think that here, what you guys have available to you is not following strictly a federal model, which probably is going to put people more in the sidelines of doing the minimal amount and being fairly idle, and they fall into drunkenness and other things. And there are definitely people in bad positions that need some help. So it's really a delicate balance that can truly be struck, but by not looking at it from a big macro level and looking at it from the community level and understanding the people that are in these positions, what their individual struggles were, that was the best approach that took place during the early years of this country before 1965, where they could use the church to help with this. They had people who brought people into their homes temporarily. One of the big things in the early years, I think in New England, was incentivizing people to own land and work your land. They believed very hard if you own your land and you can work your land, you can come up with an economic means of ownership over your own survival and then trading with those around you. That was by far one of the best ways to remedy the solution. But like I said, there's no real 100% solution. It's a complicated thing, but you guys have the liberty. You have the ability to look at this entirely different than everybody else has and try something different and see what works. And I think that's going to involve people sitting in this room here getting involved, people who read the paper getting involved, people who are on Facebook next door getting involved. Habitat for Humanities, again, I think they do a fantastic job. I would love to see people get involved with that, but it's going to take the whole community to get behind this and make this a viable solution, but it will never be the best thing out there. It's just going to improve what's already broken. So I think that if you guys can delve into some of those specifics, and I'll be happy to try to, paraphrase it and put it into a little bit more pointed presentation. I'm happy to offer that up, but I don't think it's something that we should then be kicking the can down the road 20 years and have the conversation come up again that 20 years ago we talked about this and nothing was done. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anything further on that, Council? I'm ready to move on. All right. We'll go to item 8C, discuss and provide direction on the hotel occupancy tax process. Mr. Briley.
So a number of folks here in the audience here today that generate hot taxes, and thank you all for attending. It's the first event for me to go through and actually look at how those dollars were distributed. And in my professional career, I managed what was called MDF, Marketing Distribution Funds, for reselling channel partners, and it's a lot like hot funds. And we had very strict rules, regulations to help our resellers grow their business, and that's really what it was for. So they would receive allocations, and they would provide very concise financial reports back to me on what their return on investment was, the event that took place, and all the metrics that we were used to measure. We're a public company, and we're liable to report that back. And in the same sense, I see it very similar to the HOT process today. When I asked our city secretary what was the total population of individuals or organizations that provided reporting back to the city for funds that were allocated in FY22, I think the answer was 50%. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I don't think that's a function of not being willing or able to do it. I think it's a function of smaller organizations maybe more challenged to do it. I know that Councilmember Kirchner had a very good idea regarding leveraged marketing. And what that means to me is that we take a marketing expert who has a broader reach and a more sophisticated reach to reach publications, radio, press, social media, and others that could potentially take some of the marketing burden off of the recipients of some of the hot process. That doesn't mean you lose control of the messaging or anything else. It means a resource is being added to help you be more effective. And that's really what I'm trying to accomplish. So what I've requested is a 60-day period to work with the CVB and anyone else that wants to talk to me about this. I really want input. To come back to the City Council once again with option 1, 2, and 3. What does this look like? And the overarching goal is to be more effective, reach a more sophisticated market, bringing in the audience that you want for your events or whatever may be taking place. Historic preservation of assets is another huge part of what I want to do. So that's why I'm doing it. That's their request. I'd ask people not be nervous that we're looking at it. I think if we're not looking at process and procedures periodically, then we aren't doing our job. So that's why I put it on the agenda. Thank you.
So, did you want to say something?
I'd just say I'm going to be on that.
Okay, so you will carry on with this and invite people who want to participate, but you're going to be indirect working with Brady Clausen and the CVB and perhaps people in his board and so forth. And the goal is to improve our system so that people who apply know more about how to respond appropriately and so forth.
Yeah, so we can help their businesses grow, because that's really what a hot fund should be doing, right? Be more effective and provide better transparency of why, because at the end of it, once we disperse the funds, we all receive letters about how come, why not, why didn't I get more? And I want to dispel all that and set expectations up front. You're accountable to provide the reporting. Here's the heads and beds, because we as a city have to be liable. We're liable back to the state that we're executing properly. So improve the process, improve the procedures, grow the business.
Maximize the dollars.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else?
Thanks, Randy. I love that you're taking this on. Thank you for doing it. I just wanted to add, if you could consider looking at ways that these organizations can engage with new people, to Wesley's point about getting involved in the community. Sometimes it's hard to figure out if you're new to town or you want to get involved, how to do that. So I think it's an important part of growing their organizations and just providing that. And also thank you for more consistency in reporting.
Thank you. Anything further on that item? All right. We'll go to 9A, City Manager Update.
Okay, Mayor, Council, this is my big monthly update. We provided information to you last week in your packet. I think it was available to the public as well. An updated presentation from the first one that we did last month. We'll continue to do this on a monthly basis. I'm not going to go over all of the information that was included in the packet. I've taken out certain slides. We are going to concentrate just a little bit more on some new development slides. Public Works, specifically our water supply issue, what those revenues look like. We also have some electric revenue information. And then finally, we would like to concentrate a little bit more on fire EMS. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been presenting to individual county commissioners, starting with the county judge, trying to educate them better on fire EMS operations, what our budget requests look like, and so forth. So I wanted to give the council the opportunity to hear that same presentation. So we have Frank Stead and Chief Bizzle with us today that'll work through a really short presentation with a lot of detail. So getting into it, again, adding a little bit more to what this looks like in terms of developed lots, permits for single family residential lots that are on the ground. And we hear a lot of concerns about this 1,221 total residential lots on the ground. This is what that looks like in terms of total building permits issued on an annual basis going back to 2012. So you can see that there was a gradual increase. We talk about this 50 to 60 per year. number. Although we have a lot of lots on the ground, you can see a lot of those came from this period where we had a lot of growth, a lot of development of lots, land that was annexed. In that 2020 to roughly 2022 timeframe, big spike there in 21. So looking at this year, getting a little bit closer back to normal, there are 50 projected for this year. And I don't know if you or Garrett wanted to add anything to that, or if you have, council, any specific questions about this. But again, going back here, a lot of lots on the ground. We are not seeing this explosive growth in our population going back here. That is about what we see every year. And I'll talk about apartments next and how that compares to what we have on the ground.
Question on building permits.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
how many of those are actually being built right now? There's no time frame, right? You can receive a building permit and then you could wait 5 years to start building, or is it sooner than
You
that?
just start within 6 months. So I would say most of those actually do get built out. I would say we have less of an issue on the single family side as we do the commercial. Commercial tends to stall. Now the one caveat, the Lennar development on South Creek, and Friendship Lane, they're wanting to start pulling building permits probably by the end of this fiscal year. So that 50 is projected on what we're seeing, the trend, but knowing that they are out there and revving up. So they have been in contact. So that number, depending, I would say very much depending on Lennar and what they do and how quickly they move, that number will reflect that.
What is their first phase? Like 200-300?
About 100 with each phase, yes.
Okay, I want to go back to the Friendship Project. I noticed driving by there this morning some bulldozers and things are going on, but I've been told that things have been brought to a halt, or is it just on a slower pace?
Are you talking about at Creek and Friendship, where the Creek extension, where they're building out the roads?
We're talking about I'm trying to think the name of it, but it comes in right there at Friendship and where the apartments were across the street. The big 400 unit.
That's the one I was referring to with Lennar, yes. So the 400 is in 4 phases. So we expect them to come in one phase at a time. They are trying to get a phase 1
so
building
they are
permits.
Still continuing.
Yes, okay. Yeah, they slowed for sure, but they've kind of regrouped the entire team just in the last week or so. So they are proceeding.
I drove by yesterday and they're working on utilities and
yeah, it looked like utility work.
Okay, moving back to the presentation, apartments or multifamily apartments, duplexes, townhomes, and condominiums. And we mentioned this last time. Since about 2019, we've been pretty stagnant on new apartment construction. We've had 800 and change on the ground, about 100% occupancy. Now we have either under construction, recently completed, or approved, but not started, a combination of all of these multifamily units of 1,024. So the large units coming up on Friendship Lane again, I believe that is the 5, help me out, Anna, the 296 units, and no, let's see, what are we adding to that number also on Friendship Lane? So we have about 500 or 600 under construction currently, about 300 apartment units approved for construction.
are all of these market rate?
Yes, sir. Market rate and above. Some are luxury apartments.
And I'd asked for this last time. It would be very helpful to have dates of when these were approved, because what I hear is there's so much development and they're taking all our water. But what if these were already approved before we were in stage 4?
Right.
And what changes can we still make, if any, to
Right.
help them be more water wise?
Right. And I've had the question a lot as we've been talking about water, and it's been hot and dry. And we'll talk about this a little bit more coming up too, but how all of the apartments affect our water supply. And going back to residential water consumption, about 70% of that consumption comes from single family residential outdoor irrigation apartment complexes use very little water in comparison, probably in that 5 to 10% range overall, so quite a bit less.
So, quick question, dovetail onto Councilmember Kirchner's statement is we did have a member of our resident approach the podium and make recommendations regarding water and changing potential construction code to include low flush, low water usage appliances in new construction. And I think we talked about that at the workshop, and it may take more work to get there, but is that something that we're keeping top of mind?
Yes, it is. In fact, that's something that will be discussed and probably recommended in the code through the comp plan process. Okay, again, just a little bit more detail on the Algarita Apartments, 619 West Live Oak, 16 new buildings, 63 one-bedroom units in that particular development. Rent started about $1,050 a month.
Is that below what kind of the market right now? I thought that they were more like $1,100.
I think that might be just a little bit below the numbers that we're hearing anyway, but these are very small units. Again,
That's the old nursing home, right?
yes, sir. And then the 1846 luxury apartments at 175 Friendship Lane, the large 3-story, 8 units. Again, some of these, the one bedrooms, are quite small, just under 600 square feet. The 2 bedrooms, just a little bit over 1,100. These are also market rate amenities and so forth. A lot of commercial construction. Construction has kicked off on the middle school campus, again, right there on Friendship Lane. That'll completely change the complexion of that entire area, both the school and the apartments. A little bit of news on the Albert Hotel, 80% construction completion. They did let their contractor go, but have hired another contractor to complete that work. It's the same contractor that was hired to complete the Immigrant just across the street on the corner of Main and Washington right there. So I think they're getting back on track. Anna, anything else to add on the schedule for completion that you might have on the Albert Hotel?
That's the most up-to-date information I have as well.
Okay.
Last I heard, it was soon.
Was what?
Soon.
Soon.
To be completed soon. So again, about 80% complete on that construction. Okay, getting into Public Works, and I'm going to let Chris talk about these slides. And again, I'll chime in. We have some finance slides that also relate to some of the information that Chris will present. Chris?
So just a quick update on the East Main Street Waterline project. You saw the lane closures. You were headed here this morning. They're completing the bore underneath the creek there. So that will be done probably not by the end of this week, but early next week, hopefully. Then they'll continue likely out of town or from the bore back to Eagle Street to complete that section. So still on schedule. The portion of line from the UPS store to South Eagle is in service now, so you'll see them going back and repairing the asphalt there. I mean, good project, just a lot of traffic control. So appreciate everybody's patience.
So this is both under budget and on time?
Yes, sir.
Well
It'll
done.
be completed by the end of the fiscal year, unless we have some major hiccup, but the contractor's making some really good progress.
Chris, when is TxDOT scheduled to come in and do the overlay?
It'll later this year, and the project will likely start next spring, I think it is the construction.
I think some of the prep work will occur late this year. The actual paving operations will probably be late winter, early spring.
Okay. Thank you. Always during our highest tourist time.
Right.
It's never a good time.
So this is something that we've been putting together every month. This is a monthly water report card. This is for the month of June as we compare to last June. As everybody knows, last June was very, very hot and very dry.
Last June, we had some very high water usage, over 4 million gallons a day. If you look at the comparison between last June and this June, we had a little over 1 million gallons a day on average reduction, which is nearly 30% reduction, which was fantastic. A lot of that is due to the cooler temperatures and the rainfall that we did have at the beginning of June, but also because of the stage 4 watering restriction and that conservation effort. I will say that towards the end of June and certainly the last 17 or so days in July, we have seen the volume of water that we're pumping out of the ground increase quite a bit. I have some updated numbers from the water department this morning. We're a little over 3 million gallons a day what we're pumping over the last 17 days or so, with a high of about 3.6 million gallons. So again, when we look at last July and what we were pumping, we were hitting some of those 4.5 million gallon a day numbers. So we're seeing some very hot, dry temperatures. I would contribute the savings there in water pumpage of that 4.5 million gallons to say 3.6 million gallons to a lot of the water conservation efforts from our customers over the last 17 days. So hopefully that trend changes, but and I have some aquifer numbers here, our slides here that all show as well, kind of the trends of what we're seeing in that aquifer, again, comparing to last year. So appreciate everybody's efforts. We'll provide another one of these water report cards at the end of this month. And hopefully by then we're seeing some different trends for the month of August.
So again, I'll echo what Chris said. Thank you for everyone cutting back on your watering. It's made a big difference going into stage 4 from 3. Our target was 20% water reduction, which we've a little bit more than achieved that. Also wanted to note that just east of us here, specifically along the I-35 corridor, Georgetown, there are areas of Georgetown where there's no outside watering allowed at this time. The city of Blanco was within 24 hours of running out of water. I think that was a mechanical issue, but they're also running short on supply. So again, as we continue to grow along with this drought, you're seeing cities really cut back on their water use, increasing those watering restrictions. So I think we're in a good position. We have 100+ degree temperatures all week this week. It doesn't look like we have any rainfall forecast for the next couple of weeks. So, we're in for a real hot, long, dry spell here. Hopefully relief in sight in the fall.
This is going in the newspaper, this report.
That is, tell me where that's going, Chris.
It's on the city's website. I'm not sure that we sent it to the newspaper as a press release.
I recommend that we get this out
Definitely
to the broader public.
Yes, sir.
Newspaper.
So just an update on our aquifer levels. This is a slide showing the canal well field. This slide was pulled late last week. It's dropped just slightly compared to last week, just a couple feet. So you can see we're still above the numbers or above the aquifer level that we were this time last year, but I'll tell you that that number or that trend continues to decrease. We're about 10 feet lower than we were 30 days ago in the canal well field, and about the same level at about 95 feet below the ground surface as we were last year. So we're right there where we were last year. And, again, if the hot, dry weather continues, and that obviously will continue to trend down.
Hey, Chris, real quick,
Yes,
pretty big spikes in the May time frame, and obviously we had some pretty heavy rains. Is that kind of a natural occurrence that we drop off quite so much? Is that just?
I think those 4 spikes that you see are just that's bad data. Obviously we don't see that kind of rebound unlike the Edwards or something. I'm not sure what that data is. I'd have to call the Texas Water Development Board, which that's their equipment. But
okay.
I think you can see kind of the general trend line if you take those 4 spikes out of the spring. This is the Old San Antonio Road wells, so a little bit further southwest of the Canal well field. Again, you can see that growth that we had, or that increase in the aquifer levels over the spring, and again the downward trend that we're seeing as the weather changes. We're about 30 feet lower in this well field than we were 30 days ago, but about 3 feet higher than we were last year at this time. So that's any questions on water? Any other questions about where we are? I mean, our mechanical equipment's doing really well for us. You know, the redundant line out of the canal well field coming down 290 East is a really good insurance policy for us to continue providing that reliable service and keeping our tanks full.
Again, we'll talk about how that translates into revenues coming up on the finance update.
So on the paving project, just a quick update here. We will be paving South Adams by the primary school later this month. In fact, I think it's scheduled for the 25th of July. We'll have all that paved and striped prior to the school opening. We will be doing a lot more paving in August and September. Some of those dates obviously after school, but we want to get the areas around school done prior to school opening. So
once the water lines are put in on Main, is it the contractor that has to pave that again, or does the state come in and repave that?
we're doing where the water line trench is, going back with hot mix asphalt as required by the state. But as mentioned earlier, the state will actually come in and do a mill and overlay for the whole width of the street. So it'll be a new pavement surface for all of Maine.
It's kind of blowing your city manager's theory on potholes.
City-owned streets on the pothole side of things, so we don't have control over the TxDOT roadways, unfortunately.
And the TxDOT project, that'll go from Whataburger or further east?
I believe the current limits are from Crystal Drive, where the water line project started, all the way to the Y.
Okay.
The entire stretch of Main Street.
Okay, right.
So just quickly on parks, pool use, we're seeing just a little bit of increase, a big increase on town pool due to the splash pad, wildly popular, but a steady increase with park pool as well. We do have the lifeguards available. It's very hot, so a lot of kids getting out, so those are generally trending up. Just wanted to throw this in. We'll do this every month. The schedule for July events, special events that the city may have a little bit to do with. So coming up at the end of the month is our swap meet for those of you that like to attend that 3-day event out at the park. Okay, moving on to finance, sales tax update. So we're about 75, 76% through the year in terms of time. We're about 77.4% of our budget of almost 8.9 million. Just a little bit more detail. And if you look at this, the red line at the very top is 2023 compared to previous year's data. You can see that a number of months minus November and I believe May, we have set records. In fact, when you look at February of 23, we set an all-time sales tax revenue record of just over $1 million. So sales tax doing very good, generally trending up. Krista projects that we'll be up about 6% over 2022. So very good news. Okay, bringing Chris's information into what that looks like in terms of revenues for both water and electric, residential and commercial. I'll start with electric. And you can see right here, the blue line is 2023. Again, very hot. We had a very mild spring. You can see how we had just a little bit of a dip there, a very sharp increase in revenues compared even to the last couple of years. When we look at that consumption again, very, very similar both on the residential and commercial side. A little bit different on the water side, and a lot of this has to do with weather. You can see starting with the water revenue, the upper left, the residential water revenue, we were very flat from the roughly March through May timeframe. That was the very mild weather that we had. People did very little outdoor watering. And then we started to increase again. We're looking at the, let's see, get this right, the blue line right there. We had hotter temperatures earlier last year. So when you look at that gap right there in the revenue, that is really has everything to do with the weather a little bit earlier this year. Similar, the water consumption, and again, I'm mainly looking at that residential side. That's where most of the demand is. Very similar graph to the revenue. We just didn't see that consumption early on. That is starting to pick up just a little bit. Similar lines on the commercial side. So revenues currently are about 20%. Krista, help me out. 20% lower currently than they were this time last year. So we're tracking behind. We anticipated that. We anticipate with the coming months that we'll make up some of that. However, we will be behind year end in our water revenues. We can compensate for that. I would rather compensate in dollars than something that we cannot replace. Again, some of the other cities around us are going into the most restrictive watering stage that doesn't allow any outdoor watering. So we will see a little bit of a financial impact. We can absorb that. The good news is we'll continue to keep that water in the ground for the future use of our water customers in town. And I'll pause right here if the council has any comments or questions, or if Krista, you want to add anything.
So I just wanted to comment. So our budget for the residential water is 3.8 million for the year. We're at 2.1, and we only have 3 months left to go. So and we're May and June were pretty flat. So if July stays the same, I am forecasting that we'll be about 20% at the end of the year, because we have 1.7 million to go in our budget, and if we're going to be only at about 200 to 300,000 a month, then we'll be short about 20%.
And we've spoken a little bit about this, with revenue shortfall. We think we can handle that for fiscal year 2023, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then 2024, we have to go through the budget process to see where's the puts and takes.
Right. For 2024, I did project the 20% reduction in residential water again, just based off of where we are right now, but that's certainly up for discussion.
So we have both fund balance and a operating reserve in the water fund budget. We can borrow from that operating reserve as long as we replace it within a year, and those are both very, very healthy accounts, and we can provide you with a little bit more information on that. But I feel pretty confident moving forward again from the conservation standpoint, making sure that we have water through the summer, and also being able to, to cover that shortfall in the revenues.
I would also note that there are a couple of projects in the water department that we have not completed because of that, just kind of holding back and seeing. There's probably close to $1 million worth of projects that we have not done. Austin Street Sewer Line Project, the Franklin Street Water Line Project. So there are some expenses that kind of just put on the back burner and for this, to make sure we're not going to get, have too much expense. So.
Okay, jumping ahead, I just wanted to throw a couple of PD slides in for comparison purposes, a little bit down in terms of activity from the May report that I gave last month. Still a substantial number of calls. When you look at the total time spent on calls during any month is just about equivalent to the number of hours a single employee spends on the job in an entire year. So very busy. Police department gets about 20,000 calls a year. So this just gives you an idea of what that trend looks like again in response times and average call times. Just a snapshot of code enforcement activity, 229 official code violations, and you can see grass and weeds, which is ironic. It's been so dry, is the number one. You can see watering restrictions, 28. I think that number is up just a little bit, but when we consider 5,600 individual homes with water accounts, that number is very low. So I think people are paying attention to the restrictions and generally following the rules. So thank you again.
The swimming pool, was that draining them or filling them? Or?
I asked that same question, and I think this may be, and Chief, if you're in the back of the room here, pools that, I'll let the chief answer this one.
Morning, Mayor and Council. Some of those pool violations are from pools not having the proper fencing around them, so they may be accessible to the public. So if a child, is not fenced out and could fall in, pose a hazard. And I think some of them are also for setbacks too close to maybe a property line, maybe the hot tub, something that can be moved or shifted.
I noticed about a month ago, it's on Lower Crabapple, somebody was draining a pool, Stone Ridge. How do we know if they decide to fill it from our use? Are they allowed to do that?
Not under this current stage. You can replace water lost through evaporation, but you keep drain and refill.
Well, there's a variance process that was approved by council, so there was a change to the ordinance. So they have to apply for a variance through City Hall to be able to drain and fill their pools.
Right.
So we do see a few of those. There's probably been 15, I'd say, this year that we've seen.
But without a variance, you cannot do that. Thank you, Chief. Okay, and then ending with, again, just trends in calls for service, arrests, citations, and warnings. You can see we're flat in some of these, trending generally up. The total number of calls for service compared to 2015 is up substantially. So when we talk about our police department and there were 6 officers down, we're just getting busier. The tourism increase in numbers of visitors coming to Fredericksburg and otherwise, we're seeing an increase in the total calls for service. Okay, at this point, I'll ask Frank and Lynn to come up and we'll walk through the fire EMS update. And again, this is very similar to the presentation that we've been giving to the county judge and the county commissioners. Frank?
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Frank Stead for the Fredericksburg Fire EMS Department. I'm going to review with you our current status of operations of the department and some information as far as our operations. First, this is a picture of June, just an example of the number of calls we're getting per day. We had 353 calls the entire month of June. Our peak calls were 19. Our minimum calls were 6. We averaged 12 calls per day for the entire month. This is a look at the entire year of 2023. We've had a total of 2,025 calls for the year. You can see that we started in January with 274 calls, and as I said, in June we're down to 353. And it's the usual up and down motion of our calls for service from our citizens. I would take a step back and give you a perspective of what's happened over the last several years. I started with data in 2018. You can see that from 2018 until the end of 2019, we had a steady, slow growth progression, about 3% growth of increased calls for service. Then we had our COVID shutdown. During the COVID shutdown, because we had fewer people within our county, within the city, we saw a drop in our calls. Then after that, we saw a rebound. And then we peaked in the first quarter of 21 with the ice storm, which you all remember. But we came back after the ice storm at a new higher level of service requirements. You'll see that we came back with 962 and 1,006 calls those next quarters. Then we had a series of brush fires that occurred, which were our record as long as I've been here. I've been here for 20 years, more brush fires than we ever had before. Then that came back down. We're back into our current level of activity. You can see we're continuing to maintain that higher level of demand for services that we saw starting right after COVID and now increasing. We took a closer look at what is actually going on right now and why we're seeing increased call volume to try to understand how we can better serve the citizens of our community. So for the year, looking at last year for the first period of January to June of 2022, we had 1,994 calls. In that same period this year, we've had 2,025. And those calls are broken down into different types, and that's the way we track our data and to understand what kind of service we're providing. The type 100 calls are fires. These are house fires, grass fires, car fires, any related fire type activity. The type 300 activities are medical, trauma, motor vehicle accidents, lift assists. And then the other types are, we have another group of miscellaneous type calls, fire alarms, calls for welfare checks, and so forth. You can see that the type 100 calls went down from last year. And that's really understandable because we don't have a severe brush fire this season as we had in the past year. On the medical side, in the 300 section, 300 continues to grow, and our other type calls were flat. So what we did is we took a closer look at the 300 section, the medical section, to try to understand why our volume of calls increasing. So we have a number of categories for calls, as I'd mentioned. So in the medical area, we have medical, trauma, lift assist, transfers, motor vehicle accidents, and a smaller group of other calls. You can see that the medical calls have grown from last year. We had 776 calls, and that's grown to 870 calls in the same 6-month period. Trauma calls went down slightly. Lift assists were also down. Transfers were up from 239 to 302. Our motor vehicle accidents were down slightly, and our other type calls were up slightly. So we're trying to get understand why did that happen. We also took a look at what areas of the community, of the county that we serve and the city are driving those numbers. So if you look at the urban areas, which is the city limits, and this is based on an NFPA standard that we use for our evaluation of our calls. Urban being the city limits, suburban for us is the ETJ, rural is 8 miles out from the center of the city out, and beyond 8 miles is called remote, and that's out to the county line. So you can see in the urban area, our number of calls for this year is down slightly from last year. We had 2,711 calls in the first 6 months, and so far this year we've had 2,653.
Can I ask you to go back to the last slide, the transfers? So we're actually up year over year. And I guess I'm just, not questioning the data. With the change in ownership, I was expecting that number to start to drop, but I guess I'm off on that. When you say transfers, you're transferring patients from Fredericksburg to San Antonio or Austin or wherever, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. That number, we have been told by the hospital that those numbers should drop because of the fact that they are going to start utilizing the rooms here to put those patients in. We haven't seen that happen yet. That's not to say that it's not going to happen at some point.
Okay.
Moving forward.
Thank you.
So we looked at the urban area, and then we looked at the county, and as I mentioned, the county was broken into 3 pieces that we tracked: the suburban, rural, and remote. So in the county, you can see the number of calls in the county continues to increase, and it increases in each of those 3 areas. So from a growth standpoint, what we're actually seeing today is continued growth in the county is driving our numbers in terms of gross number of calls.
Frank, do you see that trend continuing in the county?
Yes, we do at this time. And again, it's partially tied to the development that's going on, and increased traffic that we're seeing on the major thoroughfares because of our tourism benefits here in the town.
Do we have the equipment we need to take care of that, or will we be talking about that during the budget process?
We will be talking about that during the budget process.
Okay, thank you.
So one of the ways to understand how we operate and what drives the utilization of our resources was to look at, this is a county map. And we actually have the county divided into zones, and we track our response times within those zones on a daily basis. So you can see within the city, our response time is about 5.3 minutes. Within the suburban or ETJ area, it's 6.8, and then it grows as you go farther out into the county. So if we're talking about, say, a call to Harper, it takes us on an average 25.5 minutes to respond to a call in Harper. Within the city, it takes us a little over 5 minutes. So you can see that it takes 5 times as much time, to service the Harper area as an example, than it does within the city. So this all drives how our costs are incurred and where we're spending our resources, how much resources we're spending within the city, and how many resources we spend in support of the rest of the county.
Do any of the county fire departments, like Willow City or Stonewall or Terra Linda, do they have EMS units?
So again, here we're looking just at what we do in terms of support for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Harper has 2 ambulances in their community. Because of the low turnout to response, we take the majority of those calls as they come in. Half of our budget comes from the county. So as what we feel is that we are responsible for the county, so we will immediately respond regardless of where it is at in the county.
Okay, thank you.
And when you look at the numbers, generally, the number of calls in town versus out in the county, there's about an 80-20 split, 75-25, just right in there. But when you look at the response times and the amount of time that is spent on each calls, 80% of the time is spent out in the county and only 20% in the city. Again, the numbers are much higher in the city limits, but that response time is much lower.
Frank, is there any correlation with the colors, like over, going more east where it's pink? I mean, are there more calls towards Stonewall and less toward like Tierra Linda? Or is that not addressed at all in the colors on this map?
So in terms of the number of calls, this only reflects the average time.
The time, okay.
We know that we get more calls, for instance, in the Stonewall area heading east, as a result of the traffic on 290. You can see fewer calls in Doss on the very other end of the scale, fewer calls in Doss.
I think this might help with your question, Emily. This is the total number of calls and where they're happening. Right. I don't think the colors correspond in terms of like a heat map.
It's just pretty.
Right. And this is the heat map again, where the concentration of calls are. The darker the red, the higher the numbers. Any other questions for Frank or any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you very much. And just quickly, wanted to provide you a little bit of information on health department activity in terms of new retail, mobile health, temporary health permits, and then routine inspections performed. So again, some activity out in the county, also within the city limits. Wanted to touch just briefly on positions currently open within the city. The number was 18 last month.
But
Sorry, I'm going to go.
Back to the health department, I dropped by their new offices on Llano, and I'd recommend to the rest of the council that you drop by and see their new offices. It's a huge improvement over what they had before.
And again, this has been fairly static with the exception of the city accountant position. We had 2 of those positions open. The employee that left one of those positions has come back to the city. We reposted that position with the opportunity to work remotely a couple of days. So again, mainly data entry, data manipulation. As we're talking about trying to attract people into the organization, we're being a lot more flexible when it comes to schedules and things like that. In this particular case, we were able to get an employee back. So we're going to continue to develop policies and apply those where it makes sense. Again, as just a benefit where we can to get folks into the organization. You can see we're down 5 police officers and an animal control officer and the other positions here as well. engineering, staff engineer, any kind of professional employee like that. We're having a very difficult time attracting any applicants. That position has been open, Chris, several months now, and we have not received a legitimate application. I think maybe one so far. In visiting with engineering consulting firms, San Antonio, Austin, they're also struggling to attract professional engineers to their organizations. So again, we're one fewer than we had last time. And finally, records management. We had our shred day on July 7th. We shredded 108 boxes from City Hall, 100 boxes from police for a total of 4,840 pounds shredded. So we currently have 268 boxes remaining, correct? 495 sets of plans stored in the City Hall basement. And I wanted to note that the police department is already 95% paperless, and that's what we're trying to get to across the organization. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions the council may have.
So we can put a chair in Shelley's office now?
Maybe.
All right. Let's move on to 9B, recycling discussion. Garrett?
Good morning, Mayor and Council. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to give you an update on the city's current recycling program. We'll be talking about the overall sanitation department in a lot more detail during the work session tomorrow, but hopefully this provides you some good updates. Again, just like Clinton's update, this is meant to be an open discussion, so chime in at any time. So getting started, the city's recycling center is located at 302 East Ufer Street, the northeast corner of Lincoln and Ufer. It's open weekdays from 7:30 to 5:30. We are closed for processing on Thursdays, and we're also open on Saturday from 8 a.m. to noon. So currently, the recycling center accepts sorted materials that include cardboard, corrugated cardboard, aluminum, tin cans, mixed paper, which is a combination of newspaper, magazines, and office paper, and also number 1 and number 2 plastics. So number 1 plastics are things like shampoo bottles, water bottles, Coke bottles, things like that. Number 2 plastics are a lot more dense and harder, so things like milk jugs, toys, tabletops, things like that. So the overall goal of the city's recycling program is to divert waste away from the landfill cells. So the city also does a lot of things that could be considered recycling. So in addition to the recycling center, we've got the street sweeping program. We recently expanded that to include the residential neighborhoods. We're trying to do that 2 to 3 times a year. In addition, we sweep the central business district twice a week. That occurs on Tuesday and Friday mornings, usually between 3 and 5 a.m. So you don't see them, but that's happening. And then we also have the leaf collection program. That keeps things out of the landfill, and it also keeps things out of the street gutters. That occurs in the spring and summer. We also operate the residential yard waste drop-off. So if you look at that lower picture, that area is located behind the city's IT building, just east of the recycling center. That is open 24/7, so anybody can drop off at any time. It is intended for residential customers, so we prefer that the landscape companies, people like that, don't use that. It's a small space, so we want to try to limit the amount of material that comes in.
So what is the material? What is
grass clippings, leaves,
Organic
things from
stuff.
people mowing lawns, things like that. We also have the weekly curbside brush stripping service. I know the residents really appreciate that. I will say we have been behind here recently because of some of the hailstorms. So we do try to make it around town once a week, and we typically do that. But after large storm events, those services could be delayed. So we'll get to you. It just may be delayed. We also accept scrap metal. There's a scrap metal dumpster at the landfill near the office. So we'll show you tomorrow where it's located, but kind of in the middle of the landfill facility to accept scrap metals. And then also the the things that are chipped, the brush chipping and the leaves, those are all collected and processed into single ground and double ground mulch. We also have a compost pile. So I want to take this opportunity to let the public know those materials are available for sale at the landfill. We usually have a pretty good time or we're able to sell the compost and double ground mulch. We do currently offer the single ground mulch, single ground mulch for free. So if anybody needs mulch, come out to the landfill. We'll get you set up.
And that's sold in bulk, right?
Yes,
Not bad.
typically a 3-yard bucket.
Okay.
So, but we'll give you smaller amounts if needed. I'm just going to run through some charts here showing a lot of information from the previous fiscal year. So the left chart shows the overall recyclable tonnage we brought in. So we brought in 591.8 tons. You can see that left side of the pie chart, that's cardboard. So it makes up the majority of the materials we bring in. And then if you look at revenues, that's the right side. Again, cardboard brings in the majority of our revenues at 63%. And then if you combine metal and aluminum, that makes up another 36%. So really that's the majority of our revenues. Right now, papers and plastics aren't really bringing much revenue. I've got a chart that covers that as well.
So Gary, revenue is one thing, but profits another is what is our cost to process all? We make any money, or we?
Not really. The recycling program operates at a deficit. We've calculated we spend around $125,000 annually on these efforts. It's just the right thing to do.
So the benefit really is that we're preserving our in-ground.
Yeah, we refer to it as airspace at the landfill.
So that's a big benefit.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. How many years left do we have in that?
So we'll talk about it a lot more tomorrow. Our most recent annual report showed about 12 and a half years of life remaining in the landfill. We are currently underway on a feasibility study, and we just got the preliminary report. It shows a little over 8 years of life remaining. So in terms of a landfill, that's not very much time. The planning efforts take a long time, so we definitely want to continue this discussion and figure out a plan for the landfill moving forward. We'd like that number to be at 50 years, not 8.
Thanks, Garrett. Do you all track at all, like how often people are coming to the recycling center? I'm just thinking through a lot of questions of just, staff that's there and, are there lines at certain times? Are, 7:30 to 5:30, 6 or 5 days a week? Is that?
Yeah, we did a lot of tracking soon after COVID as we were coming out of that to try to figure out if we could change the hours and limit that exposure. But I think we were running at 300 to 400 people a day coming through the facility. I don't know if we're looking at those numbers right now, but there are definite peaks. Around the lunch hour, it picks up, and typically in the morning before people go to work, that's why we're open at 7:30 to try to allow people to come in before they go to work.
I know there've been some rumblings about the location because it's convenient in terms that it's downtown. I don't know how many people know that that's actually where you go, and would it make more sense if maybe we moved it to a different city property? Is everything? Everything is in. There's nothing underground, right? It's in the building, and there's the
correct.
Processing.
Space is limited there.
Yeah.
And one of the charts I'll show you, we're kind of maxed out at the amount of tonnage we can bring into that facility. So we've talked about moving it to other locations. I know a number of communities have tried to utilize unattended dumpsters, and that just hasn't been effective. We talk about contamination. So if there's a bag of trash dumped in a dumpster that's intended for plastics, it could mean that whole dumpster needs to go to the landfill.
Yeah. Thanks. Several years ago, we were having a discussion on recycling, and the location of the recycling center was brought up, and several people said it was very far out. Currently, the one on Lincoln.
Okay.
We're getting closer though, because we're the one
on Lincoln.
far out. Okay.
So moving on to this next chart. So the bar the bar chart portion of this is the tonnage brought in by year. And the green line is the revenues related to that, those recyclables. So overall, back from 2008, that was kind of the peak. There's been a downward trend in both tonnage and revenues. You will see small spikes. Leading up to COVID, where you can see the drastic drop off during that time, we did have to limit hours and materials. But the key takeaway from this chart is there seems to be a rejuvenation in the recycling industry. Some of the issues with China have been worked out or are in process of being resolved. And we're hoping this leads to a lot more stability in the markets themselves. Any questions on this chart? And as I mentioned, this is going back and just looking at the commodity prices for the past year. So as you can see, aluminum's by far the highest. Cardboard, has good revenues, and it's all about the tonnage there, the amount of material we bring in, that helps really generate those revenues. As I mentioned, papers and plastics don't really bring in much money. Currently, plastics are zero. We're not making anything, basically. Federal International, who we contract with our recyclables, hauls them off and utilizes them, but we're not generating any revenue from those materials. And I will say, going back to the good years, 2008, plastics only brought in $10 to $20 a ton. So it's not like that line's ever going to get up near the aluminum revenues. And I wanted to close with this chart. Again, we'll be talking about this a lot more tomorrow. But these represent the total tonnage of materials that the city processes a year. So that top line, the pink line, is the solid waste that is landfilled. So for instance, last year, we landfilled just over 46,000 tons of material. The second highest line, the dark blue line, is that yard waste and brush. That number last year was 4,520 tons. And then the bottom line is the recyclable materials. That amount last year was 591 tons. So again, when looking at the program as a whole, the city recycles about 10% of the waste we process. And again, that's the goal, to keep it from going in the landfill. But out of that 10%, 8 to 9% is typically yard waste and brush, vegetative materials. Only 1 to 2% of that is recyclable materials. So we're always looking for ways to expand that. Again, that's going to be part of the discussion for tomorrow.
So we'll be talking more about this tomorrow
Yes,
specifically.
sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Garrett. Any questions? We won't wait for tomorrow.
I don't know, Mr. Williams, were you signed up to speak?
Yeah, Jeff?
Okay.
That's okay. You've been patient. Take up some time.
Well, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Jeff Williams. I live in the county just outside the city limits. We've lived here for 23 years. And one question I had on those slides, Garrett, is I know that at one time the city did recycle glass, and at some point they cut that out of the stream. And so what year did that fall, and how did that affect the overall volumes?
I don't know the exact year. I think it was prior to that 2008 window that I showed on the charts.
Okay.
But you are correct. At one point, the city did work on that.
Well, I did notice that, and I'm sure everybody in here knows that the city does not recycle glass. And I think there's a huge opportunity there for someone to step in and do that. Over the years and with improvements in technology, there are ways to reuse glass that may not have existed in the past. One of the primary uses, I think, that would serve this community well is collecting and processing the glass into sand that can be used in road projects. That can help offset the cost of the road projects. And it also can eliminate a whole lot of tonnage from the landfill. I've been working with a group called Empty Harvest. It's a 501c3, and they're looking at establishing a program primarily focused on picking up and collecting and processing glass from the area wineries and breweries and distilleries. And that, I don't know any percentages, but that has to be a major source of the tonnage that ends up in the landfill. And as an aside to that, more often than not, when the wineries dispose of their glass, they're disposing of it in the cardboard cases, and that's going to the landfill too. So that's another opportunity to take that cardboard out of the landfill and put it where it needs to be, and help increase the tonnage there and increase the revenue there. What we are looking to do is raise money to buy some processing equipment and some collection equipment. I've had long conversations with a lot of the wineries in the area, probably 40 so far. Every single one of them is on board with doing it, and they're willing to pay some fee to have it done. That's yet to be determined. The county has committed, if that's the right word, or they've shown great interest in using the sand in all their road projects. So there's already kind of a prearranged end user for some of that material. And as that goes forward, I would hope that the city would take a look at that and utilize that as well. Where we are right now is we're kind of at a catch-22. We're ready to start raising funds, soliciting donations and grants and all kinds of things like that. The problem is we don't have anywhere to put this operation, and logistically, obviously, that's a problem. We can't sustainably do that on any sort of privately owned property because of the cost involved. There's been other property that's been on the agenda to look at. The problem is it's in Blanco County, and one of the chief reasons that glass is not recycled more than it is it costs a lot to move it from point A to point B. So having to move the glass from Gillespie County to Blanco County while we get a quote unquote free site there, you're going to eat up all your funds on transporting it. And then once it's processed there, you got to get it back here in Gillespie County or to the city to use it. So a lot of that back and forth just doesn't make any sense. So we're looking for a place in Gillespie County. The county recently was looking at a property out on Yinsky Lane. They were looking at buying a 10-acre property out there. That was not approved. That was something that we were hopeful we would be able to be a part of. Obviously, it didn't happen, so we're kind of regrouping and coming to you folks and saying we need to have this happen, and we're asking for your help to see that it does. We'd ask you to look at city resources, city property, city operations, and see if there's a way you can slot a use like this in so that we can get this thing up and going. Everything's ready. It's ready to move. We just, like I said, we need a place to put it. And so that's where we are, and that's what I'm asking you guys to consider today and in your work sessions and in your budget planning, to consider having a resource like this available not only to the county and the wineries in whole, but eventually being able to work this into collection from the city as well. There's been successful programs all across the country that we're modeling this after. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. It's all been done before, and there's plenty of examples of where it's been done very successfully, both financially and as a resource management tool. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Any questions?
Mayor, do you mind if I ask him a question? Jeff, thanks for the update on the county property on Yansky. Do you know if the county was able to acquire that equipment?
They had an opportunity to acquire some equipment from Blanco County. Mm-hmm. It's old. It's operational, but barely. The issue is that because of the age of the equipment, maintaining it is going to be costly, and obtaining replacement parts may not be available because the equipment's so old. So while it's a generous gesture from Blanco County, I don't think it's the best way to go with this. We've looked at pricing on new equipment, and obviously it's not cheap, but we have a goal as an organization to raise around $400,000. That would cover the cost of the equipment, transfer, the pickup equipment, the grinding equipment, and some administrative cost, insurance, things like that. So that's where we're trying to go. Once we establish that, we'd welcome conversations with you guys about how to run the operation, who processes it, where it goes, where it's stored, who owns the equipment, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
We're here to help. We're
appreciate
not
that
trying to thrust anything on anybody, but this could be a very satisfying community effort if we can get all this going and everybody buys in on it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Oh, you have a report that we put together?
Yes, everybody has it in there. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Item 10A, review the future agenda spreadsheet.
Okay, Mayor, Council, we have a very short agenda so far. For August 1st, we have a recognition, formal recognition of the July 4th Parade Committee. And then I've also asked Shelley to add a legislative update, and I'll have to visit with Mick. Mick provided a really good update to me just recently that I would like for him to present to the council regarding legislative changes. And how that would affect the city. So that's all that we have on the agenda currently. Am I missing anything? Anna, do you have anything?
Well, we decided to keep the housing discussion.
We'll have the housing discussion back on.
And yeah, shorter agendas are not a terrible thing with all the extra workshops we have.
Sure, you bet. Thank you.
Further comment?
Oh, I do have one. I don't know if this is going to be a part of the budget or the budget discussions or not, but thinking about right sizing the cost for renting out market plots. I think before we approve a budget, we should also make sure that those numbers are where they should be.
Which ones? I'm sorry.
For renting out market plots and
Renting
other
out market plots,
city
right.
things, because that would impact the budget.
Reviewing that.
Is that going to be a part of the budget discussion, or does that need to be handled separately?
So we can talk about that, and we've talked about that in the past. Even if you double, triple, quadruple those rates, it doesn't really amount to all that much. So I think there have been other discussions about maybe how to generate revenue from the special events that might make a little bit more sense. So if you would like to have that conversation about how we do that, we understand it's cheap, and we understand we don't generate a lot of revenue, but again, even if we really jack those rates up, there's not that many events where it really generates a lot of revenue.
I'd love to look at that.
Sure.
Me too. All right, Council, we're at the end of the agenda. Anything further? Thank you all. We are adjourned.